Good day, viewers, and thank you so much for joining us once again. This is Big Talk with me, Costa, and today our guest is Honorable Tendai Biti, a man of repute. Honorable, welcome to the show.
Good afternoon, Costa.
It's been long before we heard from you, and it's quite a disservice to the people of Zimbabwe, given the issues that they've been, taking down our nation by storm. But we want to rush to the land issue, the land question. You know that one of the causes of the second Chimrenga was the land question. The armed struggle was because of the land question. But it looks like that issue remains unresolved. I just want you to for the benefit of our viewers who are watching, to explain to them the pronouncement that government made a fortnight ago, that those who benefited from the land reform program in 2000, the farms they are owning, they are sitting on, they are occupying now, they are now registrable, transferable, and bankable. What does that mean?
Yeah, it's a very sad announcement. It's an announcement that, for all intents and purposes, reverses the land reform program through the stroke of an announcement, through the stroke of a pen. Emmerson Mnangagwa and his regime have reversed and are attempting to reverse the land reform program. And if you reverse the land reform program, you are in fact undoing the essence, the substance, the soul, the anchor and the foundation of the liberation struggle. The colonialists came into this country by 1898. They were empowered by an order in council that was given to the British South African Company, BSAC, to acquire all lands and to have dominion over all lands, including Mashona land. By 1907, it was clear to the company, the British South African Company, that the land north of the Limpopo did not contain another gold reef, that there was no gold at all, and therefore a massive program of land acquisition was begun by the settler colonialists. In 1919, the Privy Council of the British government, a court of law, in a notorious judgment called In re Southern Rhodesia, declared that the Africans, natives, black Zimbabweans, could not own land, were too primitive, too underdeveloped to own land. They couldn't own land. That judgment also declared that the colonialists themselves did not own the land in Zimbabwe. It belonged to the crown, it belonged to the Queen. But the colonialists were clever. So they visited the Secretary for State, the British Secretary for State, who ironically was Winston Churchill, who advised them that persuade the British government, give it concrete evidence that you are capable of owning this land and farming this land. So the British the internal government after 1923. Remember, there was a referendum in which the colonialists asked themselves, do they want to be a colony? Do they want to be a province of South Africa? They voted very narrowly to become a self-governing colony. So that self-governing colony, through its first prime minister, then appointed a retired New Zealand judge called Maurice Carter, who conducted a commission called the Maurice Carter Commission. The Maurice Carter Commission carried out its work between 1925 and 1928, 1929. It came up with its recommendations And its recommendations were that blacks can't own land. All lands in Zimbabwe should be reserved for white people. And white people should have the right to own land. That land which white people are not going to own, it will belong to the state, to the crown. Thirdly, it resolved that black and white can't live together. Black and white can't live together. So the Morris Carter Commission's findings were then made into an act of law called the Land Apportionment Act of 1931. The Land Apportionment Act of 1931, which then gave more than 51% of the land to the settler colonialists. And then blacks were reduced to reserves. So they were pushed away and located in tribal trust lands that are still there in present-day Zimbabwe. We call them communal lands. So the 51% kept on increasing. The state had power of declaring any rural land and tribal trust land, commercial agriculture. In other words, a white man could simply go and take over that land. So modern nationalism is then spared by the Land Apportionment Act. And of course, the question of one man, one vote, the failure of representation. So you cannot separate the struggle for our independence, the struggle for decolonization, from the Land Apportionment Act, from the land grabbing that took place in particular from 1898 to 1980. So what you now have now is that from 2000, fast forward, there was land reform in this country, the fast-track land reform program. The fast-track land reform program was an attempt to deal with the question of land hunger. So land was acquired. Over 11 million hectares of land were taken away from white people. And over 200,000 people, black people, were settled on the new farms. The idea of the land reform program was that land is taken away from white people
and given to the black man,
and given to the state, not to individuals, to the state, which will then pass it to black people, but it will remain having the title because it's a finite resort. So it can't be privatized, it can't be individualized. So if you look now at the original section 16B of the Constitution, which is now section 72 of the current Constitution, land is compulsorily acquired. The erstwhile owner, the white man, does not have a right of going to the courts, of questioning the acquisition. Secondly, he doesn't have the right to compensation.
You mean those who used to occupy the farms?
They have no right to compensation.
Why?
The obligation for compensation remains with the former colonial power. The only compensation that the government of Zimbabwe is obliged to do is the compensation for improvements. And the Constitution explains, there's a preamble in section 72 that says you took our land for nothing. So we can't compensate you because you dispossessed our land. We can't compensate you. And that principle is very important. We can't compensate you because you took our land, so we can't buy our land. However, we appreciate that. So if you want to be compensated, go back to the former colonial power. And ZANU, rightfully or wrongfully, claims that at Lancaster House in 1979, Margaret Thatcher and the government made an undertaking that they will provide money for compensation and for acquisition. It's a contested historical fact. My own position of the matter is that this was such an important question that the nationalists who negotiated the Lancaster House, which became our constitution, should have had this inserted in the constitution. And the failure to have that undertaking by the British government put and inserted in the Zimbabwean constitution is negligence, or is proof that there was never such an undertaking, or the terrible negotiators. But the fact of the matter is that it was such a material term, it ought to have been put in the agreement, which is the Lancaster House agreement. But let's come to 2000. The constitution then says that any land that has been gazetted, and gazetting, remember, initially, the government would issue a notice of acquisition in terms of the Land Acquisition Act, a Section 5 notice or a Section 7 notice. But farmers had a right to contest, and they contested. The courts were clogged. So in 2005, Chinamasa got impatient and came up with the 17th Amendment to the Zimbabwean Constitution, which introduced the notorious Section 16B. That said, we can compensate, so we can take without compensation. And we can take without your right to recourse to the law, to the courts of law. What this amendment did also was that once your land has been taken, the registrar of deeds is supposed to cancel your title deeds. Stay in the constitution, section 72. Your title deed, the original title deed, is now cancelled. So the beneficiaries of the land reform program don't have any title deed. They can't use the white man's title deed, which was endorsed, because that was cancelled by the constitution. Why was it cancelled? Because the intention of those who were taking land was that this land now belongs to the people of Zimbabwe, owned by the state. Then you had chapter 16 of the constitution. Chapter 16 then says, at some given point in time, the state can distribute this agricultural land. In other words, the land that has been taken away from white people. And when it does this, it can do this through leases and so forth. It reluctantly says it can also issue title, but it's a very reluctant provision. But when we do this, it has to be in terms of a law. When we do this, the land commission must advise. Part of the land commission is to advise on privatization. Thirdly, when we do this, there must be adequate compensation paid by the person who is acquiring the land. Fourthly, when we do this, the land cannot be given to a multiple farmer.
What does that mean?
It means that when the land is privatized, if you are going to be given a lease or a certificate of occupation or an offer letter or a title deed, you can't be the beneficiary of another piece of land. So, the process of reversing the land reform program, the process of privatizing the land program requires massive revisiting of the constitution. And it can be done without an act of parliament. That defines the compensation that the individual who is now being given the title deed must pay to the state. Because the constitution doesn't say you get this land for free. But the announcement by the government last week was that the beneficiary of the land reform program, who did not pay for this land, by the way, is now going to get a title deed and be allowed to sell that land. I don't believe that that can be done without an act of parliament that deals with the consideration that the beneficiary must pay to the government, that also deals with the imperative of protecting future generations who may want to get the land. And also it is obscene to try and privatize this land when you have not compensated, even for improvements, the original white owner. There is a 3.5 billion agreement between the government of Zimbabwe and the former white farmers. Firstly, it's contested whether the compensation was 3.5 billion. Some farmers would argue that it must be $11 billion. But the real challenge is that the government doesn't have the capacity of paying this compensation. So some white farmers would argue that, look, you have failed to compensate us. You might as well compensate us in land.
Just on that point,
even if it's reduced the hectareage.
On that point, last week the finance minister said there are 441 claims, and their claims amount to 56 million, thereabout. What do you mean when you are speaking about 3.5 billion, 11 billion?
I think you are mixing. They are the 354 million you are talking. These are claims in respect of farms that were acquired where the government had a bilateral investment protection agreement with another sovereign state called a BIPA. So the government had a series of BIPAs with various countries, Germany, Austria, Holland or the Netherlands, South Africa, and so forth. So these
Honorable, what I mean is, the finance minister said they verified 441 claims under the global compensation deed. Under BIPA, there are 94 claims amounting to 196 million.
Yeah, so we've got two claims.
Yes.
Yeah, we've got two claims. Mm-hmm. We've got the farmers whose land was taken, who were not protected by BIPA. These are the ones now that the government has negotiated a $3.5 billion, 3.5 billion compensation. Compensation for improvements, and that has not been paid. They are hoping to pay maybe 1%. They've not been paid. They've not been paid. Then the second category are the BIPA farmers. So my submission is that it is hypocritical to privatize when those that were dispossessed have not been compensated, even if it's for improvements.
But did you also maybe appreciate the background? Because they were saying, no, we have noticed for quite some years back that our farmers, regardless of having land, they failed to utilize their farms to a full capacity because they do not have resources. They can't access loans, they can't access credit lines because their land is not bankable. So do you appreciate the background?
No, I don't appreciate. I don't appreciate. Look, this is a blatant act of extraction, of greediness. A few individuals in that cabinet want this land privatized so that they themselves can acquire these farms and build empires, expand their farms. So a few individuals are behind this. They issued 99-year leases. It only required an act of parliament to make those leases hypothecable, attachable, bankable. So those leases were missing certain things that are contained in a title deed. First is the diagram deed. In other words, there has to be a clear, definitive definition of the land that is covered by the lease agreement. Lot 4 of Umzengwane farm, measuring 200 hectares, held under lease number so and so. The Registrar of Deeds would then exercise in the deeds office that land, so that anyone, so if you go to the bank, the banker would know that I am dealing with this land. And if that lease has to be sold, the person who's buying that lease knows that I'm buying a lease covering this specific hectareage. And the lease is still has 60 years to go.
So there's no need for privatization.
There's no need for privatization. If you go to the United Kingdom, there are lands called the commons that are held through leasehold, that are executable, that are hypothecable, that are bankable, but they are supported by an act of parliament. So they created a fiction of a lease that is not enforceable. And if it's not enforceable, it's therefore not transferable. And if it's not transferable, it's not attachable. The bank needs to attach. The bank needs the lease to be genuine security. But these leases are not genuine securities. They're not genuine securities. They're not bankable. So the solution is not issuing title deeds. The solution is to make the 99-year lease hypothecable, attachable. The issue is to securitize the lease. How do you securitize the lease? You give it the same features that are on a title deed. What is the most important aspect of a title deed? It is the property description. It is the diagram deed that is registrable in the deeds office and creates what is known in Latin as a right in rem, a right enforceable against the whole world. So a minister official cannot wake up one morning and cancel my lease as is happening now. Just like a minister official, the Minister of Local Government can't wake up one morning and cancel a title deed. You can't do that because real rights have been created that are registrable, that are transferable. The solution was to securitize the lease. They failed to do that. But now, because they are greedy, they want title deeds. But they will have the same problem because the original title deed of the white man was cancelled by virtue of the constitution.
But in your view, Honorable, would you see the banking sector, supposedly they've successfully give farmers title deeds, but do you see the banking sector itself really now starting to dish money to these farmers?
In future, part of the final resolution of the land reform program is to restore a land market in Zimbabwe. If land only has a use value without exchange value, it's dead capital. It's dead capital, and it doesn't realize its value. And part of the challenge in Zimbabwe is that you've got about 19 million hectares of land, communal land. 19 million hectares of land that constitutes communal lands that doesn't have title. It's dead capital. It only has use value, but it doesn't have exchange value. And part of the reasons why our rural areas are underdeveloped is that the people in the communal areas, including myself, because I farm in the communal areas, we don't have exchange value. So we can't actualize the value of our land. We still have the theory and fiction that belongs to the president. So one of the issues around revolutionizing and bestowing value in Zimbabwe is to have land with both use value and exchange value. It does not necessarily have to be a title deed. It could be a certificate of occupation, it could be a certificate of title, it could be a lease. So the land reform program, which took around 15 million hectares of land and converted what was live capital, which had title deeds, into dead capital because title deeds were cancelled, needed that reform of a securitable title. The 99-year lease, supported by an act of a parliament with a transferable title deed. They are not doing that.
You know the character of this government. You know it better. You've been in
They agreed.
At some point.
They agreed.
But do you think they can be stopped lawfully? Is there any way they can be stopped lawfully?
I think there is going to be a flurry of litigation. But practically, it's going to be extremely difficult. And it will only work in those very huge farms, which they are targeting, by the way, where some of them had side deals with the original farmers. So even though the farms were acquired, they went and paid a few $1,000s to the farmer, and so the title deed, but with an endorsement, and that's really the target. They are not intending to benefit the owner of 6 hectares of land on a Model A1 farm in Macheke, or in Mount Darwin, or in Mushagashe, or in Matopos. That's not the beneficiary. The beneficiary that they are targeting are the supercats, the mafia, the cartels that already own fuel stations, that already own lithium mines.
Who are these?
The who is who of the criminal syndicates in Zimbabwe. I always refer to them as Garananda. So Garananda are now after land, after mines, after conservancies, after fuel stations, after fuel pipelines, after US dollars on the exchange rate, after the capture of the Mutapa Fund and everything that is happening at Mutapa. They are now after land.
How is the international community going to view?
First, let's start with the response of the ordinary average Zimbabwean. The ordinary average Zimbabwean, including genuine war veterans, and I've seen them make noise, they are going to be offended by this new construction of grid that a person who didn't pay for the farm, who didn't pay for his 500 hectares, in some cases 2,000 hectares, is now suddenly going to be given a title deed for free, and is going to be allowed to sell that farm at an open market price of probably $55 a hectare, or $55 a square meter. So further enrichment of those people that have genuinely been enjoying independence to the oblivion and to the detriment and prejudice of 14 million Zimbabweans who are suffering in poverty, unemployed, who are busy selling tomatoes or their body parts, or are cross-border traders being harassed by the police trying to cross crocodile-infested Limpopo on a day-to-day basis, or the 4 million or 6 million Zimbabweans that are in their diaspora eking a living in extremely difficult circumstances. They are going to be very angry about this new level of greed by Mr. Mnangagwa's government.
But some more veterans are actually beneficiaries of the land reform.
Yeah, but the majority are decent and the majority will understand that this is crude, unmitigated looting and extraction, and it's not acceptable. It's against the land reform program, and it's a total reversal of the land reform program. Herbert Wulshe Chitepo is standing in his grave. Dabaningi Stole is standing in his grave. Joshua Kabukongomo is standing in his grave, and Robert Mugabe at Kwazimba there is standing in his grave.
Would you have appreciated perhaps if the government would have said these farmers maybe contribute to the compensation of the former farm owners, so as to maybe perhaps make them at least do something?
I think let's follow the constitution. Let's follow the constitution. I would be against that. The first thing is, let's deal with the politics of the land reform program, so that 20 years after the land reform program, we stop the culture of dependency, that farmers are still receiving inputs from the government. What is the problem? The problem is that the majority of farmers, particularly on the Model A1 schemes, are operating on the basis of offer letters that can be cancelled on any time, particularly if they suspect that you could be supporting the opposition. So land is now being used to blackmail the political choices and the right of farmers to make political decisions of their own choice. So ZANU has surreptitiously used land in the absence of reform on the land reform program to hold hostage farmers, particularly in Model A1 farmers, and for sure they will take that farm. So any occupier and any beneficiary of the farm needs an executable, a securitizable form of ownership over that farmer, not necessarily a title deed, a certificate of title, a lease, a certificate of occupation with legal features that create real rights that are enforceable against the whole world, against the banker, against the lender, and if you are tired, and there are many that are tired that can farm, you want to transfer that land to the next person who is better able to use that land, you should be able to do that, even to leave it to your children. But you can't do that now because you don't have any right whatsoever. Number two, there should have been an audit, Mkoma Costa, to weed out multiple farm owners. There was a land audit in 2010, 2011. It was never published. There were millions of multiple farmers who sit in the Politburo of ZANU-PF. There were thousands of multiple farm owners who sit in the Central Committee of ZANU-PF. So it was never published. The Constitution says only one farm per one household. That never happened. Yes, it does that in chapter 16 of the Constitution. Chapter 16 of the Constitution. A third thing that the Constitution says, which has never been implemented, was that there must be an allowable maximum size of a farm per region. So you can't own 400,000 hectares. So there are some regions, like the southern part of the country, region 5, where you can only do ranching. Yes, a farm can go to as much as 500 hectares, but there are farms in region 1 where you don't need more than 50 hectares or 100 hectares. The Constitution demanded that the Land Commission should define the maximum sizes of land so that there is fair distribution. There are 40.
So you're saying before we even go to, if you would perhaps going to consider even the title of these things,
follow the Constitution, do an audit so that you create excess supply, because there are so many people that are owning multiple farms. There are so many people that are owning multiple farms. So comply with the Constitution, do an audit. Comply with the Constitution, make sure that one household is owning one farm. Third, make sure that there are these maximum farms sizes, per region. Per region. If you're going to do market gardening, if you're going to do tomatoes and so forth, you're in region 1, Banget, Mapinga, and so forth. It's debatable whether you need 1,000 hectares. You don't need 1,000 hectares.
Let's talk. I understand. I think everyone who's following now, he has an idea of the implications of privatizing land. But let's look at the step that the government has taken, compensating former farm owners. They said there's 20 million for those their farms were taken under BIPA, and there is 3.5 million before the year ends. The treasurer wants to disperse this money. How is Zimbabwe going to be seen at the international communities?
The land reform took place in 2000. The bulk of the farms were acquired by 2003. The government had acquired more than 9 million hectares. So 3/4 of the land that was eventually acquired by 2000. We're now in 2024, 24 years later. The government should have complied with its obligations in the constitution and compensated these people that had their land violently taken away from them. Most of them are now elderly. Many of them are dead, and so forth. So it is only just that the government should have compensated them in terms of the the constitution, but the government should also have ensured that it democratized the land reform exercise in terms of the principles that are defined in chapter 16 of the constitution. And those principles have not been adhered to. Those principles have not been respected, which is why 24 years after the land reform program, despite the fact that we used to be the bread basket of sub-Saharan Africa, we move around with a begging bowl. We used to produce.
Say it's because of climate change.
No. It's because people are sitting on farms which they are not using. Before the land reform program, this country was capable of producing around 3 million tons of maize per year. Now we can hardly produce 1.2 million metric tons of maize, and every year we have to.
Recently, the agriculture minister was saying we are going to harvest record wheat production. It's historic. That's what he was saying.
Wheat production in Zimbabwe is just political gimmick. We don't have the climate and the weather that can sustain at a proper commercial matrix the production of wheat. Yes, if you're going to subsidize and so forth, and if you look at the money that the government is putting, we're putting over 3 billion a year in agriculture. We're not getting equal returns. We are 4C. We don't have the climate. That's why over the years we've been importing wheat from Ukraine and we should concentrate on the things that our agriculture permits. Mm-hmm. We're an excellent maize country. We're an excellent soya country. We're excellent in livestock. Let's do those things that we can do.
Let's finish the compensation item and how the international community is going to see us. I spoke to the United Nations representative last week. He told me that if the government abide by its pledge to pay or to compensate, it's going to make Zimbabwe be integrated into the global economy.
It takes much more than that. He's being naive. There are a lot of challenges with Zimbabwe that increase our risk premium and make us a very unpalatable, a very unwelcome member of the international community. For starters, Let's stop stealing elections. Let's respect the democratic right of the people of Zimbabwe of choosing their own representative. We know the 2023 election was stolen. Just read the ZIG report produced by ZIG itself through Never's move. Stop assaulting human rights. As I'm talking to you right now, there are probably over 100 political prisoners languishing in prison. Where is Jacob Ngarubvumwe? Where is Jameson Timber? And over 40 or so people that are languishing in political prisoners. For what? The likes of Job Scala, the likes of myself, we are on trial for dubious charges. I'm still facing charges of going to Harvest House to demand Harvest House on the 6th of June in the year of our Lord, 2022. 2022. That's not good enough. That's not good enough. Job Scala spent 2 years. Spent 2 years in prison, for nothing. Jacob Ngarubvumwe has been in prison for countless of years. So these things make us so unpalatable. 44 years after independence, we still have effectively one broadcasting house called Zimbabwe Broadcasting Corporation. We still have effectively one newspaper called the Herald. It's not good enough. So these are the kind of things that make us unpalatable. We have got one of the most highest corruption levels in the world. We are stealing anything that can be stolen as a country. So these are the things that go beyond the land question that make this country so unpalatable, so heinous, and such a disfavorable member of the international community.
Let's put it this way. Perhaps let's say it's one step towards
the ordinary average Zimbabwean would want to see basic things, and respecting election results is a basic thing. A free and fair election, it's a basic thing. Managing the economy well, not having a currency that zigzags every second is a basic thing. That's what we are demanding as a people.
So the compensation item, it doesn't contribute to anything, because what I wanted does.
Justice on the land is necessary, and justice on the land includes doing justice to the millions of people who live in the communal lands, who are told that you don't own this land. 2 years ago, I represented the people of Chilonga in Chireds. We went all the way to the Constitutional Court. The Constitutional Court gave a judgment that was similar to the 1919 Privy Council judgment of either Southern Rhodesia that I've mentioned, and said black people in Zimbabwe can't own land and shouldn't own land. 44 years after independence, the Constitutional Court of Zimbabwe said that in the Chirezi case, in the Chilonga case. So do justice to people in the communal lands. Do justice to the beneficiaries of the land reform program. Some of them are not even allowed to build. You are given 6 hectares, but you are not allowed to build. You are not allowed to be permanent.
No, I want us to close the land question, Honorable. We'll talk other things. But explain to us what were the consequences or ramifications for taking farms that were under BIPA. And please explain to our viewers what exactly was BIPA and those kind of farms that were protected under BIPA.
I think it was just greediness. Zimbabwe belongs to various instruments that protect foreign investments in our country. One of them is a process called MIGA, Multilateral Investment Guarantee Agreements, which is part of the World Bank, part of the International Finance Corporation. So we are part of MIGA. That process includes BIPAs, Bilateral Investment Protection Agreements. So what you do is you sign a BIPA, and by BIPA you are saying we will protect your investments and you also protect our own investments. So you had many foreigners that only came into Zimbabwe because they were BIPAs. These include Dutch farmers, Danish farmers, German farmers, Austrian farmers with a beeper. And one of the farms that they took, or a part of it, was forest estate. They took that, and so many farms, South African-owned farms, protected by beepers. And of course, the farmers and their governments went to court. They went to the International Court of Arbitration in New York, and the government lost badly. Millions and millions of dollars were awarded against the Zimbabwean government. They ran into over 500 million. The representation was poor. So we lost those cases. The government is now struggling to make the compensations for the land that was taken under beeper. It shouldn't have been taken at all, because when you take a land under beeper, you are basically saying, I can't be trusted. I can breach a contract left, right, and center anytime that I want. And we've paid a price for that. The risk premium on Zimbabwe is very high because no one can trust this government. No one can trust ZANU PF. So I hope that the government can resolve the fight with the Dutch farmers, the fight with the Austrian farmers, the fight with the South African farmers, the fight with the Danish farmers, and the fights with all those farmers that were taken and expropriated, even though they were protected by the bilateral investment agreements.
Let's close with the question. You tell our viewers in simple terms, or even in vernacular, what the implications of the pronouncements by the government and even the compensation commitment that they have undertaken to do before the end of this year. We want them to have a clear message in terms of what are the consequences as we close the land section.
Vanhu vemuZimbabwe vakaenda kuhondo vachorwira munda. Vana Chairman Herbert Wheelchair Chitepo vakamira vachirwira nyaya dzemunda, kuti minda yatorwa nevarungu, saka minda ngaende kune vanhu vatema. Mugore ra2000 land reform yakatanga muno, minda ikatorwa nehurumende, ikabvumidza vanhu vatema kuti vapinde paminda iyoyi. Zvine chitsidziro chekuti mwana wega weZimbabwe anenge achazodawo munda, achazopiwawo munda, avo vanga vachishandisa munda iyi vanobvumidzwa kugara ipapo nemhaka yeoffer letter kana nemhaka yelease agreement. Hurumende yaramba iri iyo muridzi wemunda uyu, ichiprotecta avo vachazvarwa mangwana, vachazvarwa makore anouya. Land icharamba iri nevanhu. Zvino vhiki yapfuura iyi, hurumende iyi nenyaya yekukara, nenyaya yeumbavha, nenyaya yeugororo, yakuti aiwa minda itai kuipa private individuals agere paminda iyi. Asi munhu wese anoziva kuti vagere ava havana chavakabhadhara kuti vapiwe minda iyi, asi vakupiwa kodzero yekuti vachinotengesa at open market prices iyo minda iyi yavanga vachirima. Zvoreva kuti chakarwirwa paye nevanhu vakafa mumakomo, kunyadzonya, kuchimoyo, kurushinga, kuMount Darwin, kuna Nyadire, vakafira mahara. Land reform yakuriveswa nehurumende yaEmerson Mnangagwa. Zvoreva kuti vaMugabe vari kutena mugrave yavo. Zvoreva kuti vaNgomo vakatsamwa vari kutena mugrave yavo. Zvoreva kuti Chairman Herbert Wheelchair Chitepo vakafa 1975 muna March vari kutena mugrave yavo, nekuti hurumende yakurakidza kuti hapana zvayakarwira, hapana chainokoshesa, ingori kutsvaga mari nekuba mari, kutsvaga mari nekuba mari. Tarisai zvavaita kulithium, tarisai zvavaita kugoridhe, tarisai zvavaita kuplatinum, tarisai zvavaita kumabhengi, tarisai zvavaita kupetro, tarisai zvavaita kureserve bank. Kungotora vachingotora vachingotora, veruzhinji ingori nzara, nzara nekutambudzika. Vana vapera nenhamo vachienda kuSouth Africa, vachienda kuUK, vachienda kuAmerica, vachienda kuCanada, ingori nhamo, nhamo kunze kwevava vari kudya vachiguta, vanofunga kuti vakarwa hondo iyi vari vega.
Maita basa Biti.